All right. Sit on something to give some height to your hips. Block, blankets, bolsters. Something you can sit on for a couple minutes. Cross the shins, one in front of the other. Place the hands on the thighs. Press down, lift the ribs up. Keep the ribs lifted. Exhale, drop the shoulders. Press the hands down again. Take a nice deep breath in. Feel the stretch of the ribs, the spread of the lung. And as you exhale, flex the back muscles, squeezing the back shoulder blades in, the side ribs forward, and the front ribs up. So you feel the abdominal wall flex slightly to lift the rib cage and hold it, and then drop your shoulders again wide. Let the elbows come in towards the ribs, hands resting on your thighs. Move your head and lean your pelvis back slightly so you get out of the forward press of the body, but put your weight right in those sits bones and let the eyes close. So in lots of the classes, I've always offered affirmation or kind of internal journaling moments. And I'll offer one that's a little bit more about what you want to write. If you imagine your life is a white page, picture it in front of you now. White, clean, untouched, but open to possibility. And then, like all things, it's changed. One tiny little black dot in the center, like a spot of ink that is dropped. The rest of the page still pristine, untouched, except for that one little dot in the center. That if you look at the corners of it, the sides of it, you try to draw your eye away from that one black dot to the rest of the page, inevitably, that dot is still there, and our attention goes back to it. The problems of our life can feel like that regardless of the clarity of the page we have, how much space we have, all that we have to do, one tiny little thing in the center of what we consider good or perfect can be such an interference. So for just a few moments, recognize that even though there may be these little dot, this little black dot on our pages in our life, recognize all the space on your page that you still have to write the things that are meaningful for you in your life. And instead of leaving it pure and untarnished, and only messed with by the problems of your life, for just a few moments, write the things on it that you have in your life, that you want in your life, and that you work to create in your life. So that little dot will be there always. But it won't be the only thing put upon your life. That each thing you write there, in any which way you want, in any colors you want, Comic Sans if you want, you get to choose what's written on the page of your life. That even here, just in this moment of quiet internal meditation, you set a beginning part of practice. Because when we go to the mat, our page is before us, and we'll see the dot. We'll feel the achy muscle, the challenging poses, the ups and downs. But here for just a few moments with the eyes closed, we'll write the things on that page, just as we do in the yoga practice that will define us. The words describing who we are, what we want, and what we work to create. So that even though that dot is there, it becomes a tiny piece of punctuation in a much bigger story of your life. A deep breath in, slow breath out. And do so for the next minute or two. And every time you feel like your page is full, there's space in between words. Make it big writing, make it small. But make it yours, my friends, for the next few minutes. All right, take a nice deep breath in. Bring the palms together at the chest so the thumbs touch the sternum. Blow them shortly 3 times and begin. Take a nice deep breath in. Exhale. Flex your feet, chest lifted. Shoulders down. Bow your head. Salute the essence of yoga inside yourself. Bring your hands into your lap. Let your head rise. Rise up. All right, so nice to see everybody. We've had some people come on in. Hi, Shuba. Hi, Ali. Tadero. Nice to meet you. Hi, Pratima, Micah. So good to see everybody. All right, so let's start simply. Stand up. Let's grab a block if you have a yoga block. If you don't have a yoga block, you can use any other sturdy thing in your house, a chair, pots and pans, books, and stand wide on your yoga mat. So just work a few standing poses, and then we're going to work the hip flexor connection into the pelvis, and maybe the feet a little bit tonight. So standing wide, turn your right toes out away from your body, so your right heel and left arch line up a little bit, and then put your block on the outside of your right foot. So once your block's there, bring your body upright and place both hands on your hips right about where the bones of the pelvis end and the abdominal wall begins. This is called your ilium and to your iliac crest. Front bones of the ilium to the iliac crest on the side. So with your right leg turned out, try to, and it's very challenging to do, get the left to right side of your pelvis more level. Because for some of us, when we get really tight in the hip, groin, into our back, one side of the hip wants to go up higher or lower than the other. So try to balance that out as best you can. Push down through the feet, and then bend the right knee into warrior 2 for a moment. Not too challenging. Well, I say that, I don't know what's going on for you. It could be challenging for a lot of people. So once you're here, can you keep your pelvis, the top to bottom, left to right? Now it's going to tilt a little bit. The left hip will roll forward a little, but you should try to work that left thigh back. But today it's about, can we challenge the pelvic muscles to lengthen to allow the thigh muscles to do greater work? And that doesn't mean we just hold it forever until you're burnt out and tired. It means we have to engage the hips to level and then extend in a way. So push your left glute back and then bend your right knee deeper so your right thigh drops a little bit. Now, if your knee goes past your toes or past your right heel, you got to step a little wider. Good. Straighten the right leg. Step your right foot out a little farther. Crawl it out just a toe length or two out. Doesn't have to be a big jump. Check your hips. One hip higher than the other. For me, the leg that's turned out, that hip drops really low. I have to actively pull my left hip down and back a little so that I'm not putting all my weight on my right inner groin or knee. Then flex the right thigh, stretch the knee out again. But then check, when your hands are on your hips the whole time, does that left hip stay high and the right hip go down? That's you tilting your pelvis to simulate the leg muscles working, but really it puts a lot of the pressure on the hip and back. So that left hand pushes down on those bones a little bit to remind them to go down. This is what makes the outer hip extenders of our left hip work more. So it makes this left leg have to work a little stronger, pushing down through the ground, and that hip flexor right at the insertion point of the leg to the hip socket has to drop, but then also kind of funny, push into the hand a little bit. So as you bend the right knee away from you, push your left hip into your hand and down. Feel that, huh? Straighten the leg. Crawl the toes out just another little bit, toe length out. Check your hands. Push your left hip into your hand, then bend your right knee, stretching your right hip and thigh out. So the left side becomes a resistance point. Mr. Iyengar said, the secret of every yoga pose is two parts have to move away from each other. So as the left side is doing its work resisting away from the right leg and the right knee stretching out away from it. So these 2 points are pulling apart. So the space in between is where you're going to get the most stretch and work. It doesn't just become how much pressure is on my knees or how much is on my ankles, but it becomes more about the pelvic body getting width and length, not just being pulled by the legs, but by your body weight being dispersed. Straighten the right leg. Turn your right toes in. Walk your right foot back in a little bit. So you start a little closer to where you first started. Turn your left toes out. So after you get your left toes turned out, hands on your hips, check in with your hips here, because one side's going to be different than the other. You may not have to work the right hip to the same depth as you did the left. So the balance of your pelvis here. So keeping your hands there, bend the left knee, kind of take a test warrior to it, bit of Vajrasana, and then check your right to left hip height with your hands around those pelvic rims. Did one go up, one go down? Did they both go down? If they both went down, great. That means this side's got a little more openness. That hip socket's a little more mobile. Good. Take a few breaths. Straighten the left leg. Slide the left foot out a toe length. Now, I'm not telling you which toe. You could either slide it out a big toe length or a pinky toe length. This is your choice. Then, before you bend the knee, check in with your hips. Already start to try and balance them out, because this is setting the intent. So either you're going to focus totally on the problem, or like I said, we know that your warrior two might be tight or hard in your hip. Great. So if you only focus on the tight and hard part, that's only you paying attention to the dot on the page. Write something different. So put balance into those hips as best you can, and then stretch the thigh out. Because remember what I said, you write on the page that's not the dot. You write who you are, what I say, who you are, what you have, and what you want to create, right? And what you want to create is very important, because what you want to create is what's going to be your future. So when you bend that left knee again, try to keep your hips in that alignment. They may not stay perfectly level. Nothing's perfect, but we still encourage it into that direction, so we create some sense of balance and work away from the ache. Now, just as we talked about on the other side, the right thigh pushes down in the floor. The right hip pushes into the right hand. It doesn't go up, but it pushes out away from the left knee. The left thigh stretches out away from the right. Take a few breaths. So there may be some shaking, but there's a pelvis stability. This is how we create pelvic stability. Those of us that fall a lot in yoga poses, and I do, this is one of the ways that I found is really beneficial for actually creating some realignment and balance. Not just doing Warrior Two, but how we do it with the pelvis and the awareness of our pelvic floor. Straighten the left leg. Stretch the left foot out another toe length. Pinky or big toe or in between, right? You got 5 different lengths on your toes, I hope. I think I do. Yeah, I'm fine. Good. Check your balance. Now, with your right hand on your hip, move your right hip into your hand. Don't let it come up. Stretch it towards, and then bend that left knee away from that right hip. So the right side's resisting the left side movement, right? When you pull a bowstring back, you hold the bow and you pull the string. You don't let the bow go with the string, or it's not going to create that space and that tautness. So the right hip is the wooden haft of the bow, and you're pulling that left thigh away from it. Changes it up. So even in our most basic poses, we can work on the idea that we create a point that stays stable or moves away from the point that traditionally moves. We get a chance to feel stability in that because both sides are working, and it's not about weakness or over flexing, but it's just an awareness of bringing both parts together. Good. Take a breath. Straighten your leg. Turn your toes in. So grab your yoga block. I know I said put it on the back side of your right foot, but you're going to move your right foot. You're going to place the block flat on your floor and put your foot up on the block. If you don't have a yoga block at home, books, a big pot that's big enough for your foot to fit on, not in, but on top of, anything to elevate your foot at least 1 inch. As you can see, Tristan's getting the block set up. You can kind of see it past the corgi, kind of blends in with the dog, which is unfortunate. But she's going to put her right foot up on that block. Oh, I offended him. So you put your right foot up on that block with your toes turned out. So now your right hip, which traditionally when you bend the knee drops lower than your left hip, is now elevated slightly higher. So it has to be the one to come down with it. So hands on your hips. Push your left hip into your left hand. So it's not going up, it's going out. Like it's going to go past your left heel somehow. Bend the right knee, stretch that right thigh out. But again, like the bow and bowstring idea, that left hip is the haft, the right leg is the string. So that left side should always be resisting towards your hand. And now with the right foot higher, check your hips. Which side of the pelvis is high, which is low? The right side. So now when you bring that right hip down, it gets the chance to feel what it is for the muscle to move the bone into the socket, as Mr. Engar would say, and the bottom side of the leg works. The hamstring flexes and the inner thigh flexes. So this isn't just about how strong your quad is, it's can you engage all the circumference of the leg. I used to think, well, I just had to keep forcing it until I got it. That wasn't always, that's turned out not to be true. It's now more of an understanding of how can I best learn to feel my body? How do I bring balance into it? Straighten your leg. Step your foot off the block for a second. Grab a second block or a chair if you use a chair for your hands in various poses like triangle or side angle. So if Tristan's going to put her right foot back up on the block and put her second block on the outside of her right foot. So you're going to do the same thing except have another block nearby for your hand. If you don't have a block, again, you can use any type of surface or thing that adds some height so you don't have to reach your hand forward. That's perfect, Allie. That chair will work just fine. Put it on the outside of your right foot. So on the other side of your, next to your pinky toe. There you go, you got it. Nailed it. So you'll probably put your hand on the chair leg or on something, you'll figure it out. So start here, both legs straight, strong legs. Work the pelvis already. Right hand on right hip, left hand on left hip. Push your left hip into your left hand so your pelvis begins to already work that left side, your left side stable. Bend your right knee again. Before you do anything else, both hands on your hips. Check to make sure which one's higher, which one's lower. Balance them out as best you can. The right one's probably going to come down. And then for a second, keep your legs active, that left side resisting to the left. Take your right hand to the block or onto the chair or down your chair leg. There you go. You can grab that chair leg, Allie, and hold on to it for dear life. There you go. Yeah, good use of chair leg. Bend that right knee, Chaya, and push your left hand into your left hip into your left hand. Yeah, same time. Good. So as you push your left hip into your left hand with your right hand on your surface, your left hip did go higher. That's normal in this pose. So keep encouraging it. Keep pushing your left hip up into your left hand. So it's like your left hip is now pushing up towards the ceiling. Don't straighten your right leg. Your right hip still has to pull down though. So whereas the pelvis in Warrior 2 starts parallel, stays parallel, side angle, the right hip comes down, the left hip comes up, but they still have to pull away from each other. So the right hip now pulls down into the floor and the left hip pulls up to the ceiling. So you're still opening up the front side of the pelvis. So for a moment, keep your right leg, bring your body up, put your right hand back on your hip, rebalance your hips. Feel how your hips went from here to here. So you went from tilt to level. Feel the space across the front of the pelvis. Feel the flex of the legs. When you take your right hand down again onto the floor, the block or chair or whatever, try to keep that space across the front of your pelvis and just rotate the hips into it, not turning it, just laterally rotating over. So take your right hand back down. So your left hand pushes up into that left hip pushes up into that hand the whole time as you stretch your body over that right thigh. Feel the difference? Keep your right knee bent. It is very easy to want to straighten the right leg here. That's very much what triangle teaches us to do. And triangle does a really good job of simulating this. But if we overwork triangle, and trust me, I really love triangle pose. I overwork it a lot. And we don't do side angle. The thing that this pose gives us that protects triangle pose and our hip joints in it is that it teaches our thigh muscles to lift the pelvis, and it teaches the pelvic muscles not to just hang on the psoas, the groin, and tweak the lower back. That's how some of us get really achy hips or tight inner groin muscles with it. Push your left hip up into your left hand more. Pull your right hip down towards the ground more. And you'll feel your thighs work. Contrast. Good. Bring your body up. Step your right foot off your block. Move your stuff to your left foot. So remember that none of this is meant to make this all a way more intense workout. This is very challenging work. You will sweat, you will feel muscles working. Many of you know that you come out of my classes the next day very sore and wondering why you keep doing it. I wonder that too. But how much can you take from this so when you practice tomorrow, whether in a class or on your own, that you make it yours, right? I think yoga is the tools that helps us create what we want, not be put into the form of like an ideal something or other. I'm not interested in the cookie cutter form of anything. Yeah, I can't get them to work. So hands on your hips. Right hip pushes into right hand. Bend the left knee so the right side's resisting the whole time. So now that the left foot is higher, which hip is higher, that hip has to draw down. And it'll probably be your left, so you're already starting the rotation of the pelvis. Take a couple breaths. When you take your left hand down onto the block, floor, whatever you got, don't let your right hip roll forward and the front of your pelvis shrink. Keep it open and stretch your ribs, stretch your thighs over it, and let your legs or let your hip pelvis roll over, one over the other. So the right rolls over the left. Nice, much better. Much easier. No. Open. It is. That's why it didn't go down. So here, check in with your pelvis. Are you still resisting your right hip into your hand? Now, because your upper body's tilted, your right hand is more towards the ceiling, so your right hip pushes up towards the ceiling. Your left hip's more towards the ground, so it pulls away from the right hip. So if the right hip's going up to the sky, your left hip pulls down into the ground. So the knee bends more. But never at the cost of your abdomen rolling in towards the groin, never at the cost of your front body laying towards the floor. So this isn't about how much you twist your shoulders back, but can you use your pelvis and the muscles of your pelvis to line up an action for your spine so your upper shoulder and neck doesn't do most of the work, that your hips, your core, and your leg muscles do the greater part of the work. Good. I can't hear you if you're talking, Allie.
Oh, I was just gonna ask a question. Is it easier?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it easier if your legs are further apart or closer together?
That depends on the person. Now, I would say your feet should start about 3.5 foot apart, roughly, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Start there and then experiment from there. Good question, though. You experiment from there. Some people find it in the very beginning to come a little closer than that. As you get practiced, you go a little farther apart. You never go so far that your knee doesn't go over your heel, though. Thank you again. I always love a student that asks questions in the middle of the pose because then everyone holds it longer. It's nice. A few more seconds. Work the pose. All right, bring the body up. Take your foot off the block. Grab your yoga strap. If you do not have a yoga strap, you can use a belt, piece of rope tied up. But you want to take and make your loop about. You want to take and make your loop probably about. So you'll make your loop fairly small because you're going to put your feet into it, and so your feet should be just a little wider than your hips. Your feet.
Dustin, I've got a question.
Yeah, Karen, what's up?
When you're separating your pelvis like that, right?
Yeah.
Do the front muscles of the abdomen actually wrap around the bones?
Yes. Well, they can't wrap around the front muscles of the abdomen. The front muscles of the abdomen feel like they're spreading inside the pelvis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on the right track. All right, so good. So you have your feet a little wider than your hips. You have something around your feet to push out against. If you don't have a strap at home, you can do this inside of a doorway. You can hook your feet inside of a chair leg, anything so you can push out against something. You want to resist, have some level of resistance. If your hamstrings are tight, feel free to put your hands on blocks, chairs, or anything else after this. So take a look at your knees before you do anything. And even though you're pressing your feet out, try to get your knee joints to point forward. It's really quite a challenge for some of us, especially the tighter we are in our outer glute and our piriformis muscle, which is across the top of the buttock. That makes the knee want to rotate out, even though the toes may be pointing forward. So as best you can, you turn the knee center. So like for Tristan, her right thigh has to rotate in more. So it's going to feel like you're pushing the inner buttocks back. And what I mean by the inner buttocks, it's that part of your buttock that is right between, it's closest to the gluteal cleft. So that space closest to your tailbone moves back and wide. Better, yeah. All right, once your knees point forward, fold forward, take both hands onto the floor or to your block or to your chair. That's perfect, Ellie, that'll work good. Just tie it up around your feet, friend. Yeah, you got it. As long as you can push your feet out against something, you're going to be okay. So please make sure the strap's around your feet. You got it, Shuba. You're all good. And turn your toes forward. It's easy for the toes to want to turn out. Try to point them straight ahead. Try to turn your knees to point straight ahead. So as you push your legs out against that strap or rope or belt or whatever you're using at home, remember, you could do this inside doorways. It's just about resisting the legs out against something. So with your hands on the floor or on the blocks or chair or anything you need so you don't have to fight your hamstrings. Good. And just push your legs out against that. Turn your knees to point in. So it's going to, if you look at your knee joint, those of us tight on the back body, hamstrings, glutes, hips, our knees want to turn out. If we let our knees do that, we're going to end up putting pressure on the knee joint and can cause pain and injury later. So as best you can, looking at one knee then the other, try to turn the knees to point straight forward. And then push out against the strap. Just even doing this action, one, your hamstrings will stretch, some of you feel. And then it becomes a little bit of work of the tendency will be to want to lean forward into your hands or to push your hips really far back. You have to kind of feel or look at your own hip to heel alignment and make sure your hips aren't too far back or your heels aren't too far forward. If your knees are bent a little because you're tight in the hamstrings, that's normal. Your hips will go back a little. That's fine if your knees are bent. But if your legs are more or less straight, check in with yourself to where your body is. And you can usually tell by if you lean forward a little bit, if you lose pressure in your heels, you've gone too far forward. If you lean back too far and you feel like your toes dig into the floor, you've gone back too far. So you got to find that sweet spot in the center where the foot stays more or less level. And break that strap. So this modified Uttanasana, this modified standing forward fold, with this much leg engagement, can be quite a bit of work. So continue the lesson idea from the first part where if one part goes one way, another part must resist or go against. Your upper body's folding forward and down to the floor. So the legs must lift back and up. So bend your knees a little, everybody, to take some of the tension out of your hamstrings. Thank you. Push out against the strap just to keep your left to right balance. And then, keeping your knees bent, flex your thighs, and think about lifting the bottom of your buttock up to the ceiling like you were rolling your glutes up. So think about you're trying to stretch the back side of the leg up and back. And then when you straighten the leg again, lift it up higher. Woo, but don't lose your feet. Don't lose the strap. It's a lot of different parts and pieces that are going to challenge a lot of your different hamstring hip issues, especially if you sit a lot, which we all do being stuck home. And everybody has a little bit of tilt or lean. Some parts are tight, some parts are not. No one is uniformly anything, whether uniformly flexible or uniflexibly inflexible. So you're going to feel different parts on each side work. So you have to look at your knees and make sure one's not turned out and one turned in. You have to look at your feet to make sure they're both pointing the same direction. Right? You're the creator here. You want balance in your life? You start with the small stuff you can work with. You may not be able to change the world, but by God, you can work those hips. Take a few breaths. Bend the knees again. Bend the knees really deep this time. Move your hips back because your knees want to go forward, so don't let them move your hips back. Try to keep that balance in your foot and hold. Break the strap. Turn your knees towards each other just a hair and feel how the hips really have to work now. The thighs really start to work deeper. Lean your weight back, Miss Allie, so you get your pressure in your heels, friend. Lena, you're doing good. Are we shaking yet? I see some people shaking. It's good. Take a few breaths. Last time. So you feel the strength of your legs. Now keep the strength of your legs. Pick the bottom of your buttock up, straighten the legs, but don't allow it so your spine can hang down. And it'll be tight. Some of us will get, a little different flex than others, but you're still all working the proper muscles to engage balance and not just let it happen to you. Very rarely does balance just happen to us. Right? Like, what is it? One time a year we can stand an egg on its end perfectly, like the vernal equinox. There's one moment in a year that is perfect balance. That's not good enough. You need to make it happen, not just wait for it. Bend your knees, place your hands on your thighs. Slowly up you come. I know it's not even true, so it's a false narrative. Come up out of your strap. Please lay flat on your back. Good job. Well done. Don't get rid of your strap or rope you're using. We'll use it for the next little part. Laying flat on your back, stretch your right leg straight and pull your left knee to your body, grabbing the back of your left knee with both hands. Oh my God, you all grab the back of your knee. It's a Christmas miracle. No one grabbed their shin yet. I love it. So with your right leg straight, grabbing the back of your left knee with both hands. Before you start pulling the left leg into your utmost power, back off of how hard you're pulling it in and push your right hip down into the floor harder, not your right knee. It's if you've been in the old Vanguard schools long enough, you've heard the term push your right thigh down. Push your right hip down. Use your right femur bone to try and pin the hip into the ground. And then stretch your right foot away from you, not just the toes, but the whole sole of the foot, like you were going to push it into something else. And then bend the elbows and pull the left knee to your body. But don't lose the right leg. If you feel that leg like buoy up, reaffirm it down, because remember, the left leg's coming towards you, the right leg extends away from you. That's the more important part of the action. The minute you pull the left leg in and you start to feel the right leg lift, you're already starting to compensate and not work the muscles of the legs or the hips. You're starting to work your low back. And even though the low back does get some work, it doesn't need to do all the work. So stretch the right thigh away, or right foot away from you. The right thigh presses down into the hip. And from here, with the left leg pulled to whatever degree, without using your hands to do it, try to straighten your left leg a little bit so you feel that left hamstring flex. You feel the leg lengthen. Good. Keep working the right foot away from you, the right thigh down. Flex that left thigh up. So the hands hold it in place. The strength of the leg and the hamstring itself does the extension. Those of us that want really open hamstrings, loose back muscles, or mobile hips, this is a big part of it. Or you want to get into those standing poses that really neat, like look really neat, where someone's holding their foot up in the air or things like that. This teaches the muscles of the leg to engage and extend in a way that's not your lower back. And you'll shake. Like if we hold this, and we're going to hold it, you will shake a bit. Your shoulder. So check your left knee and make sure it's not turned out, but your left knee is more or less pointed at your left shoulder. Work your right foot away from you, your right thigh down to your hip, and your arms do the pull, but you only pull it just enough until you feel that right leg want to lift, and then you stop. Now bend your left knee again. Keep your right leg as is. Take your left hand onto the inside of your left knee and try to grab the arch of your left foot. So left arm on the inside of your left knee and grab the arch of your left foot. Good. Right leg re-extends out, right thigh presses down into the hip. Pick up your left foot so the sole of the foot points up to the ceiling. The leg's not straight. Pratama, grab the arch, dear, not your toes. Different pose, different thing. Check in, and for some of us, just even getting the foot to point up to the ceiling, the knee and the foot want to turn out away from the body. Try to stack your foot above your knee, and your knee will just be to the outside of your ribs. So Karen, your left foot's way too far out. Pull it in closer. Like that. Now everyone, bend your knee more and use your left arm, bend the elbow and pull the knee down towards the floor. Like someday your knee was going to touch the floor itself. Work your right thigh, work your right foot. And then breathe. So as you pull that left leg down, you start to challenge the groin. This stretches the psoas muscle quite a bit. All the inner pelvic muscles and the glute, the buttock muscle into the hamstring. It also preps it for re-engagement of certain muscles. So as you're pulling the leg down, notice where your knee is in relation to the rest of your body. If your knees, you don't want your knee to go higher or lower than this right now, but push your foot out against your hand so the leg starts to straighten, not by the knee lifting up, but by the heel extending out away from the hamstring. This is where you start to really gain some mastery of length to the leg. That's not your lower back and not your groin, but the strength and extension of the leg. So you pull down on that foot and then you push that so that knee comes close to your ribs or, you know, relative to that. And so when you straighten the leg, it's the leg pushing out against the arm, not the knee pushing away from your body. Knee pushing away from your body will just irritate your knee over time. Your hands will get tired. Very sorry. All right. Take the leg out, stretch your left leg out, lay it on the floor, check in with your leg, see if there's a difference left or right.
Excuse me.
Yes.
If we want to modify it, just to make it a little bit easier, where should we put our hands?
So if you need to modify it to make it easier, I would use a strap around your foot like this, so the leg can be a little farther away from you, so you're not like having to torque your shoulder and neck. Yeah, good. Thank you for asking, Ellen. Appreciate it. All right, right foot comes in. Grab the back of your right knee with both hands. Left leg extends out. Press the left thigh down into the hip. And before you pull that right knee super deep into your body, work your left leg more, and then just slowly, just be methodical about it. Bend those elbows so you unshrug your shoulder and neck. And as you bend the elbows, pulling the leg towards you. Feel when the left leg wants to stop pressing down and pause right there, just on the edge. Part of what challenges our legs to flex and straighten, or even straighten at all, is there are certain muscles inside the pelvis that connect into the hamstring and our low back. There's a lot of them. That if they are seized up and tight, which can be from sitting or injuries or running even, we have to get them to loosen a little bit before we really try to extend on that hamstring. Or we just pull on them and tweak our backs. I've tweaked my back a dozen times, overworking my hamstrings and not modifying the pelvic muscle. And the interesting thing is it can take time to do. It's not going to be an instant piece. You just kind of work in it and be patient with it. So as best you can, keeping your left leg where it is, slowly start to lengthen the right leg. So the leg, try to keep your knee where it is, but if it has to back off a little bit, that's okay. But just push the leg out on the strength of its own. Nice, good job. You got it, Micah. Extend and hold. And then once you feel like your leg's lengthening, you feel the legs start to shake, the thighs start to flex. Your arms are still holding the back of your right knee. And the leg starts to stretch up. Just hold there. So we did it bent. Now we're starting to teach those pelvic muscles to lengthen with the leg long. And I understand this is not easy to do. It's hard to take something online sometimes. We're all online right now, and it's even challenging for me to teach. So I appreciate all of you and all of your questions. And there'll be time at the end, here before too long, you'll be able to ask some more questions. Hold on. So it's not about pulling the leg toward your head, but it's about keeping both legs active. And learning to extend the legs on their own strength. So if you want to get into the really big flexed open pelvises, splits, things like that without it tweaking your back or your knees, this is a big part of it. Bend the right knee. Good. Take your right arm to the inside of the leg and grab the right arch. Now, if this is too hard, like you feel like your shoulders are off the floor, your neck is hurting when you do this, use a strap around your foot. That's perfectly appropriate. I encourage to always modify first. So once you get a hold of the foot, the knee is bent, the sole of the foot is pointed up to the ceiling. So the foot's over the knee, and then pull down with that right arm, like you're trying to pull the right knee down towards the floor on the outside of your rib cage without your left hip or thigh coming up that much. If you had sandbags at home, if you're the kind of yoga practitioner or weightlifter that had some weights or some sandbag to put on your left thigh, it's great. Good modification to do. Please look at your right foot. Make sure your right foot is not falling out to the right side. This is not the extension of Padottanasana. You want to keep the foot above the knee and draw down. And just breathe into it. Let it stretch, let it work out. Now, if it's too intense, feel free to back off a little bit. I would encourage you not to drop out of the pose entirely, but allow yourself the space to let whatever's in there work out. Right? Because you're creating something different than the habit. If you only push on the tight spot, that's like only sitting there staring at the dot on your page. Focusing on the bad's not going to help you create something new. It's going to help that bad take over your life. Whatever degree you've pulled the knee down, keep the knee there or back off a little bit so you can experiment without tension and push the leg out against the hand or strap so the leg starts to extend, but not the knee going up. The leg stays down and you stretch out on the leg on its own strength. This can be tricky to do because it's very easy to over push from the knee joint. And even if your leg almost shoots straight up, that's okay. You'll feel that leg stretch into that hamstring, but not from the knee flexing straight, but from your foot pushing into the strap or your own hand. And for most of us, it does not go perfectly straight. I still don't get it perfectly straight, even after many years of practice. Some days are better than others, but it is just about the process of working on it. Take a nice breath. As you exhale, bring the leg down. Relax your arms. Bend both knees. Pull both heels towards your hips. So you walk them in nice and close to your buttock. Let the soles of the feet come together and the knees fall wide into Baddha Konasana. Push the sole of the foot together firmly. And then keep pushing the feet together and kind of wiggle or kind of push your hips towards your heels a little bit. So you wiggle from your shoulders down to your pelvis and kind of worm roll your way down there. And eventually your heels touch the flesh of the buttock as you push them in. It may not happen tonight, but it's something to work towards in a pelvis opening action. So your heels pull into the best of their ability, and then you take your pelvis to your heels. The reason I don't say you just pull your heels all the way in is that if you just over pull on the heels, it makes it about the knee joint. And if your knee gets tweaked, your groin and pelvis gets tight to protect it. When you put your feet together like this and then move your pelvis towards it, it's an interesting action that takes it out of the knee and puts it more in the hip. So you'll see a lot of old teachers, when you do Baddha Konasana, say pull your heels close and then pick your hips up and move your hips even closer. Just spend the next few seconds here. Stretch your arms overhead if you can, like you're going to touch your thumbs to the floor, and stretch your arms long. Now, if you're in a room where you're up against a wall or something, your right hand can grab your left elbow and your left hand can grab your right elbow. And each hand pulls the elbows away from the shoulders long. So your back will arch. That's natural and that should happen. So you get this lateral extension as you push your feet together. So you're widening the pelvis. And as your hips stretch towards your heels, your arms stretch away, right? Each part has a resistance. Resistance is not a negative thing in our life. Although sometimes we can feel why there always has to be resistance to what we want to do. That's balance. But we persist, we ask questions, we learn. Take a few deep breaths here, because this would be a position that pranayama gets practiced in. And so we're not going to go to full practice, but start to kind of feel when you take a very deep breath in here, breathe deeply into the abdomen, how you can breathe very deep into the lower part of the pelvis. And when you exhale, you can relax the stomach muscles so they kind of sink down into the bowl of the pelvis. This position allows for a lot more abdominal breath, so therefore very relaxing. And the more you learn to breathe into the abdominal area, it will release the lower lumbar, the psoas muscle especially. It's very tight to the inner pelvis. Can have a calming effect. May not always, but it tends to. Especially if you prop it up with blocks under your knees or blankets. So be here for just a few moments longer. Enjoy the deep breath. All right. Bring your arms down. Stretch your legs out straight. Just relax on the floor in Savasana with your eyes closed for a few moments. So let your eyes close. A few deep breaths in, slow breaths out to begin. So remember, there was the dot on the page that was the problem that we looked away from, and we started to write on that page the positive things we are, positive things we want, and the positive things we create. And in yoga, we create. So what did you create today, my friends? It's good to know. It's good to observe. It may not have been what you wanted, but that's the reason we separate the two. Sometimes the work we do creates something that we never even imagined, even if it's more questions or different insight. 17 years ago, I went to my first yoga class. And over that course of that time, I've created the spot I am in now with all of you. I just wanted to not have pain. So give yourselves space to create, my friends. Not just to want something to happen with each action you do, but to see with wonder the power you have to create in your life something unique and beautiful as each and every one of you. And rest and enjoy the fruits of your yogic practice. Take a nice deep breath in. Stretch the arms overhead, lengthening through the sides of the body. Letting the inhale invigorate you, energize you, top to bottom, and all points in between. To energize your creation and all that you are. And bend the knees on your exhale, roll to your right side. Slowly press your palms into the floor and slowly up you come. So nice to see everybody. I hope you're all doing really well.